It is 7 o'clock, so we're gonna go ahead and start. So we are into our seventh BZ principle of the Working Genius, and today is about meetings. Everybody's favorite thing to go to, right? Right? Yeah, I could tell by it's 7 o'clock in the morning. This is not a meeting, but everybody's favorite thing to go to is meetings. So today we're going to talk about that. But I just want to remind us one of the reasons why we do this is we want you to have a way that in everything you do, whether it's in nursing, whether it's in business, whether it's in education, government, anything that you would ever go into, that you're always looking to provide that extraordinary effort. You're always looking to go for excellence. And that is a big part of meetings. I think a lot of times we miss an opportunity to serve people by not understanding meetings. So we'll go into that as we go through just how this Working Genius model, how we can understand common language. The idea is like, oh, you wonder is really your genius, or tenacity is really your genius. You're going to start to see where meetings fall and how or what personalities or what geniuses are needed for those meetings. All right, so before we get into that, we got to have a big idea, and this is my big idea for today. Meetings are needed and necessary. We're all going to repeat this. No, we're not. This is not a cult, but meetings are needed and necessary to get things done. You got to have meetings. And that's the Working Genius. The Working Genius, the idea of wonder, invention, discernment, galvanizing, enablement, and tenacity. Those are all elements of getting things done, and meetings are a part of getting things done. So that's going to be our big idea. But here's some meeting facts. Let me give you some. Some of the meeting facts that I wrote down are these. I got to make sure I've got them all. Meetings can provide clarity and direction. So you just had a class council meeting last night. Probably a lot of clarity, direction with JS so fresh coming down the pipe. They're a platform for innovation. So I know I've been in CAB and ops meetings, and they're like, hey, we're going to do this for the alt night, and ideas get thrown out, and there's some innovation that is done there. It's happened. I've heard it happen at the info meetings as well. Connections, that's probably the biggest one that I get when I'm listening to meetings, especially info, especially SGA. There's a lot of connections. They're talking about things. Even with the ops meeting the other day, they're talking about what's going on in their life, what is God teaching them, what are they struggling with. Meetings do that. They provide that connection, so you need to look at it that way. They provide alignment, reminders, like, hey, you're a little bit off track. Let me remind you to be on track. The summit is really good at that. Like, hey, let me align you to where we need you to be. And then they also give you one of the biggest things that meetings can do, and I think we miss this, is it gives the leader and the people the platform for being able to understand the why. So every meeting that we go into, that I want to go into, I want to make sure I go into it and be like, okay, don't forget the deeper reason of why we do what we do. Because that's really, when somebody yesterday asked me, why are you excited about summer? What is some of the things that you really enjoy about summer? I thought that was a great question, because it made me think through, okay, what are the things that I really like about summer? Okay, connections, yes. The ability to get things done, yes. But one of the biggest things I love about summer is the opportunity that we have to see people and their lives changed by the gospel. And I'm like, man, what happened if every meeting that we had during the summer, I would remind our team about that? So that's one of the meeting facts, is like they can give us the reason of why we do things. Now, that's what meetings provide. They can be this confusing. Like, why the heck did this guy call this meeting? That could have been in an email, right? Have you ever thought that? This meeting could have been an email. They're time consuming. Why are we meeting at 8 o'clock at night? We really don't need this. I've got 5 projects, I've got 4 exams, and I've got to read this book. So they're time consuming. They are sometimes considered time wasters. None of my meetings, of course, but no, meetings can be viewed as time wasters, because you're looking at people going, why are we here? We've talked about this over and over again. Just text me when you need me. Call me when you need me. We don't need this right now. They can be time wasters. And meetings can also be really, really frustrating. They can. So with that idea that meetings provide these positive things and meetings can become these negative things, how do we actually make meetings successful? Well, one of the ways that you do that is realize and accept that it is your responsibility, even if you didn't call the meeting, to make the meeting good. So it's your responsibility that if you are going to a meeting, go to that meeting, be present at that meeting, be engaged in that meeting, do what your leader needs from that meeting. Now, if you're a leader, which all of you are, it is important that when you call meetings, you identify what that meeting is. So we are all mutually responsible, but we all need to be personally accountable. And a lot of reasons why meetings don't go well is that we don't practice this. We don't practice the intentional work of preparation. We just go to a meeting and we're like, well, we're going to talk about this, this, and this. And oh, by the way, we haven't had a meeting in a while, so we better have a meeting. Now, I've been in a lot of meetings like that, and they're like, the first thing the person says is, well, you know, we meet every week. I really don't have an agenda for this week. No. Have an agenda for a meeting. Or don't have the meeting. Because if you don't have an agenda for the meeting, then just have a party and do it at a different time and don't make people show up. But if you're going to have a meeting or if you're going to go to the meeting, it's your responsibility as a meeting attendee. If Albin calls a meeting and it's for a leave, it is my responsibility to understand his agenda so that I'm serving him. But a lot of times we just go to meetings with this preconceived idea, either that the leader's got it all under control or the people should know what I'm talking about. There's a problem. We're mutually responsible and personally accountable. So how do we do this? So let's walk through how do you have a good meeting with the working genius. I put the idea of awareness. The working genius, there's something on the website that you'll get a link to today about cravings and crushes. It's not a crush on somebody. We're already past Valentine's Day. But it's cravings and crushes. The idea is that each of the geniuses have things that you crave. So for me in invention, I crave the ability to create something. What crushes me? To-do list. So understanding that about me and understanding when I'm going to a meeting and I'm going to a meeting just to hear what Cab has planned, I've got to realize this meeting is not about me. And I think it starts with understanding what are the working geniuses, and that's something we'll go over next, BZ Principles, the idea really of cravings and crushes as we wrap up our talk here. The working genius of others, you've got to know that. You've got to know that if you go into a meeting and you're the extrovert of the group and there's an introvert of the group, but you're the extrovert and the introvert is there and they're really a tenacity person and you really need to think through details, you need to shut up and encourage them to speak up. I think that's really, really important. So there are several different types of meetings, and I want to go through them. Now, I'm going to explain them, and they don't all. These are the meetings. This is more for you to put in your brain for when you graduate from Cedarville, but we can even use this here. So the one at 30,000 feet is the brainstorming or the offsite. Our team does this. Jesse, Weston, Leslie, Chrissy, and this year April and I will go away for 2 days. We'll be in the area. We rent an Airbnb cabin. It's out in the middle of nowhere in Yellow Springs, and we go there. And the offsite is the idea that we're answering these questions. Are we solving the right problems? Jesse loves this meeting. He loves offsites because he's a wanderer. Are we missing something, and how can we serve our guests better? We're asking those questions to make sure that we're aligned right, okay? So the geniuses that are really good there, wonder and invention. Jesse and I, like, we're just enjoying life because that's where we want to talk about. We need Jesse to be like, hey, have we thought about this, guys? Now, that can be difficult, and I have to remind my Leslie's, who is big into tenacity, who loves Cab Right, to-do list. That's where she lives. I have to remind her, hey, this meeting's going to be a stretch for you, but we need you to help us. We will get to the to-do list, just not at this meeting. Because what I'm doing in that meeting as the leader is saying what the meeting is, and I'm reminding people that if it's not their genius, we'll get to that, but just probably not at this offsite. The next one is the ad hoc or the strategic meeting. It's about 20 to 30,000 feet. You're answering these questions. What's our focus? What do we need to address and what needs to be tweaked? Invention and discernment. This is where Weston and I live. This is what we do probably on a weekly basis. Okay, what are those things that we need to deal with today? And I'm coming up with these ideas, and Weston's like, that's stupid. Don't do that. So the whole idea of this is like we're looking at invention and discernment. You're asking these questions. This would be like Albin and his team, or Amelia and her team, or the Renova managers sitting down and going, okay, Renova's like, hey, we're getting this card out there. What's going to be our focus? What do we need to address? And what needs to be invented or tweaked? Should this be, like if we're using that as a Renova example, this should not be a topic for the summit because there's too many people. You know, in management, you want 6 to 9 people. That's a good team. So the whole idea is like you don't want to talk about this in the summit, but it needs to be talked about. And some of your people in the Renova management team are going to love this because they're invention discernment. Others are going to be like, can we just get the job done and stop talking about this? But that's what you would do. Cab, this is what execs you will do next year when you sit down and you think about, okay, we've gotten all these ideas. How do we take them and implement them? So that's one of the first things. Info, you would do the same thing, thinking through, okay, what are the strategic changes we need to make to the fleet? You always tell Chrissy first, but what are the strategic changes we need to make to the fleet? The next one, it's the rally or the tactical, which is the weekly meeting. This is where you live with your teams, not weekly meetings always with your teams. This is Albin, the Aleve committee. This is the summit. This is the ops. This is CAB's meeting. This is class council, info, marketing. This is where we normally stay as a group. And these are galvanizing and enablement. So these are the ones you're using the summit. And we talked about this with the Renova managers a few months ago. Use the summit to encourage, to inspire, to remind them of why they're doing the task, and then remind them of the task and rally them around that. But this is not really the time to get into, okay, let me walk you through every process, because sometimes you do that in a large group. I know this in management class. I start talking about theory, and everybody just starts doing this. Anybody got a question? Nobody answers, because everybody, when you go over too much stuff like that in a meeting, people will glaze over. And it's because they're not galvanizing enablement. The other one is the daily stand-up. So I do this, try to do this with every single one of our teammates. I'll stop by Jesse's office. I'll stop by Weston's office or April's office or Leslie's or Chrissy's. And this is 5,000 feet to the ground. So you're getting ready to land the plane. And what is everybody working on today? What do you need from me? So one of the questions I ask whenever anybody comes in and I have a meeting with them, how can I serve you today? I'm asking that tactical question, or that stand-up, that orientated question. Like, this is tenacity at its finest. So meetings, when you look at them, are not a chance to make to-do lists. Meetings need to be about the idea of wondering, inspiring, galvanizing, deciding, rallying. When you get to decide, that's where the personal accountability is, and that's where you take what was said in the meeting and put it into a to-do list. So that's how you got to make sure you identify the meetings. Actually, and then what happens is, after you have awareness of what the meetings are, it goes right to identify. And you've got to identify these things, the phase of work that you're in. Okay, how many weeks are we away from JS? Like 2.5? So we're not in dreaming phase anymore, are we? Yeah, so we're not in an offsite. We're not in like, hey, are we doing the right thing? That ship has sailed. We've already written the check to the Savannah Center. We're in that daily, that tactical weekly meeting, that ad hoc meet, that the more down towards the level, right? Now when we start talking about getting started for next year, we're at the place where we're looking at more that offsite. We're dreaming still. We met with advancement yesterday. We're making sure we're hitting the right things. It's important to understand what phase of work that you're in. Cab, right now, this is not a meeting to sit down and wonder if the alt night should happen tonight. Because in exactly, about 10 hours, it's going to happen. At this point, it's like tenacity driven. Well, what are you working on? What do you need from me? Number two, what is needed, or what is the purpose of this meeting? Don't have a meeting if there's no purpose. Don't go to the meeting without you personally wrestling through what's the purpose of it. Your leader might not know the purpose of the meeting, but you can sit there and go, okay, what are we going to potentially talk about today, and what is the deeper purpose of this meeting? That's personal accountability. Yeah, what meetings are necessary? You know what? Sometimes as a leader, there are times I hear from Mallory, I'll hear from Avery, and it happened the other day. Hey, Brian, we really don't need a exec meeting this week. Why don't we just cancel it? All right, I'm listening to the team. You got to make sure. And then who needs to be invited? Too many times people think, I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, so I'm going to invite everybody. A meeting with everybody is not a meeting. It's a scary time, okay? You need to be okay with saying no to some meetings that you get invited to. Don't have FOMO, that fear of missing out. There are times that I say no to meetings. Jesse knows this. I'll say no to meetings, and I don't say no rudely, but even to vice presidents. And I'm like, hey, I really can't make it to this meeting today. Can you just give me a rundown of what exactly you need from us, and we'd be glad to serve you? Because there's no really need for me to be in that meeting. Now, you have to be careful that way, that you don't get viewed as that person that's like, he just avoids meetings. But if I know that they're just going to be talking tactical and all this stuff about the Impact Conference, that's really not in my wheelhouse, and I don't have any kind of authority over what happens there. I need to let them do that. And sometimes the best thing that I can do is just not go to that meeting in a nice way. So we've had the awareness of what kind of meetings are there, the awareness of yourself. You got to identify what kind of meeting it is, and then the phase of work that you're in. And then you get into discipline. And I want to walk through this, and then we're going to be done. What type of meeting is it? Clarity. As the leader, determine that. Send an agenda. Like, so even before this thing happened today, if you went to the BZ Principal site, there was the notes. There's the agenda. I'm learning that as a leader. The older I get, which is happening very quickly now, is the idea that I need to have an agendas for my meetings so that, number one, I stay on track, and number two, I serve my team well. So that's what I do. Also, make sure you're aware of what meeting type it is. So stay on track is the second one, because our tendency is to move to our working genius. How many of you are tenacity in the room? Your tendency at a meeting is always going to be like, what needs to be done? If you're in an offsite, that can kill an offsite. But my tendency is always like, hey, I wonder what else we can do new. And I'm sitting here and I'm meeting with Rachel, and it's like, what can we do new? And she's like, let's get it done. And I'm like, what can we do new? And she's like, what can we? There's going to be some frustration and some air sickness there. So the whole idea is like, you've got to know that about yourself and know that your tendency is going to be what pulls you that way. That's how God made you. That's okay, but that's discipline to know at this meeting, my invention is not needed. It's not needed. And then be present. One of the things I think struggle with meetings is when people go to meetings and they're on their phones, they're on their computers, they're not listening, they're having side conversations. Guys, if you're going to go to a meeting, you're going to accept that meeting and be at that meeting and be present. Let me challenge you. A lot of you are going to go into workplaces that are not Christian. You go into that meeting and you're dialed in and you're listening and you're engaged. That is going to win you influence with that leader. You go in and you're not those things, you're going to be regulated to a place of no influence. And I want to have a place of influence so that when somebody like, man, Brian, you were really dialed into this meeting, and there's deeper conversations and connections happen because of that meeting, because we're talking after the meeting. How do I not know that that's my Esther moment to share the gospel with that individual? Look at meetings that way. So be present, have a clarity of meeting, stay on track, and then looking at the big idea again, that meetings are needed and necessary, okay? Meetings are needed and necessary to get things done. They do require this. And anytime I can put entrepreneurship on the screen, just that idea, it's fun for me. But it does. It requires intentional work. I've got several meetings I have to go to today. And this is convicting. I've got to be willing to do the work 5 to 10 minutes before that meeting, check my heart, check my ego, understand the purpose of this meeting so I can serve the people that are in the meeting. And if I'm calling the meeting, I better have an agenda. And I better have a good agenda. I better know what I'm going to say so that I can serve those people well.